This is Pixelated Zen presents Nostalgialess, where we review old and new without the nostalgia, so you know it's true. Today's game is Divinity. Developed by Larian Studios and published by CDV, the game is available from Steam and GOG.com in digital form and was originally released in 2002 to rather lukewarm reception. There are three main reasons for this though. 1. The game's name is stupid as balls. After having played the game for a while, I believe it's a reference to a quote in-game where someone derogatorily calls another, quote, his divine divinity, implying that he's so stuck up he needs divine in his name twice. If this is the case, the name is somewhat clever as a tagline or a box quote, but as the title of your game, the thing immediately meant to sell me on it. It screams shitty, badly translated generic RPG. 2. Speaking of generic, the game's setting. Seriously, what the fuck? For the most part, you're in a wooded, English countryside type area. You're being hunted by black riders. A wise wizard shows up to randomly help you. Dwarves hate elves hate dwarves, orcs are warrior-like and tribal, I mean shit. Did they even try to make things a little bit more interesting, a little bit different from your generic Tolkien RPG? And 3. The game came out 2 years after Diablo 2 and it was an isometric fantasy action RPG. This immediately screamed another shitty Diablo clone to most everybody who saw it, especially with that awful ass title. These three things combined to turn most people off when it was originally released, but is there more here than meets the eye? What the hell is this, a Transformers review? Let's get on with it. First off, the game looks like Diablo, but it plays more like Ultima Online mixed with Skyrim. The inventory system especially reminds me of UO, where you've got a backpack and you can freely move around items in it, and I love that. It does have sections for different items, such as a weapon-specific tab, a potion-specific tab, etc. Loving here, however, is more like the Elder Scrolls. You pick your class at the start of the game, but it's almost entirely meaningless. You can increase stats however you wish, and you can pick up any skill from any of the 3 tree types at will. This means you can have a mage knight who drops scorpion death traps on his enemies if you want to. I did want to. Who the hell wouldn't? And the horrified screams of my enemies? Sweet. The structure of the game is also somewhat similar to an Elder Scrolls game. You have a large open world to run around in. You're allowed, for the most part, to go where you want, when you want, and unlike Skyrim or Oblivion, enemies are not level scaled, which means you need to learn quickly that you're going to get bitch slapped back to your last quick save. So you better quick save often and be ready to run at the drop of a hat. There are a few other areas outside the main open gameplay zone, such as a major city, a darker forest, a ton of underground dungeon environments, and a desert. The final area, though, is by far the best, with its mixture of darkness and color that made it feel creepy and beautiful at the same time, and I wish they'd done more with it. Still, there's a ton of game world to explore here. It may not be Morrowind-sized, but it's pretty sizable nonetheless. Combat plays out more like Ultima Online. You click on the enemies, and your character will swing at that enemy until one or both of you are dead. One thing to note, though, is that it is extremely hard to click on the enemies that you want to attack. Most of the time, your clicks will just go straight through the enemy and you'll walk to where they're standing instead of fighting them. This frustrated the hell out of me early on until I learned that if you hold control and then press your left mouse button, your character will always attack the enemies around him. Once I figured that out, the combat became fun. You start with almost no skills, but by the end you've got dozens, and it would have been complicated to use them all in combat if they hadn't given you a pause ability. Luckily, though, they were smart. If you press space, the game freezes while you choose a spell or an item that you want to use. This is necessary and you're going to use it often. Just know that using anything will cause the game to unpause, so use that health potion before you use the stamina one, or you may find yourself staring down at your corpse. Some people will be happy to note that there is a day and a night cycle and things get dark as shit at night. As such, you can find a bed, either of straw or, if you're super rich like me, a real bed. The bed lets you sleep for a specific period of time, regaining health, mana, everything. You need a certain amount of time in-game awake before you can use it again though, so it's not an at-will health potion. Another way to regain health is by eating certain types of food, but you can only eat so much before your character's stuffed and he can't eat anymore. Both of these things can be frustrating in the early game, but they do help with a sense of immersion. Late game though, the economy was broken. I just stopped picking stuff up because I had so much money I bought a 30,000 gold house, all the potions I could ever hold, and I still had a ridiculous amount. At this point, I never used food or the beds again except to skip the nighttime. There are a ton of side quests in this game. The majority of your time will be spent doing side missions for the citizens of Rivellon. Most of them aren't fetch quests either. They're very enjoyable, story-heavy quests, and I really had fun doing them. Be aware, though, that it's possible to fail certain missions without even knowing it. For instance, there are 2 sick men early in the game and only 1 healing potion. If you give it to one of the men, you've failed the quest. You have to find a magic mirror, drop that shit in a puddle of water, and then drop the potion on top of it to duplicate it. What the fuck? That looks like a cheat more than an actual quest. One of my favorite things with the game, though, is the feeling of progression it gave me. I went from having serious trouble killing a single bee to AoE slaughtering entire troll camps like the happy little god that I am. Seriously, every level made me feel like I was way more powerful. I went from running away from these orc drummer guys to chasing and murdering them and then dancing in their entrails in just one single level up. This next part is going to be a bit controversial, but I think the game was a tiny bit too long. It took me 54 hours to beat, and by the time I had gotten to the last area, I was ready to be done. I know some people will argue that a game should be as long as it possibly can be, but I would counter that I think pacing is important. A game, just like any other entertainment medium, should include just enough to move the story, immersion, and fun along without bogging itself down in needless extras. The side quests in this game are great, but after 45 hours, I was so powerful that almost nothing gave me a challenge. I was ready to fight the last boss and beat the game. So they threw me into the final area and I had to beat 5 underbosses, after making it to them through each of their 5 mazes, in order to fight the final enemy. I should have enjoyed this area. It looks amazing and every enemy is different from the rest of the game. Sadly, by this point, I just wanted it to be over. Some games can support 80 hours. I'm looking at Dragon Age Origins here. Some games just can't. Still, I have been known to tire of games earlier than some people, so do keep that in mind. Another negative is the frankly terrible voice acting. It ranges from mediocre to downright mockery. Seriously, nobody heard this.
Taste my power! No, Mardanius, no! I am Lanilor!
And thought, yeah, that's totally a good take. That made me feel emotion that had nothing to do with the mountain of cocaine pumping through my veins right now. The sound effects, they're adequate. They're nothing to get excited about, but they're okay. Where the game really stands out sound-wise, though, is the music. I've mentioned before that I'm not a huge music fan in games, but man, the music on display here is just something special. Take a listen. The music isn't even always playing either, which is nice actually. And then suddenly you're surrounded by orcs in the middle of the forest and the music kicks in and bam, let's do this mode. Graphics wise, the game is beautiful, even for a 2002 isometric game. The water effects are great, some of the landscape is downright gorgeous. Sadly, the character portraits are derpy as shit and the cutscenes look fucking awful. What did I think of the game overall? It's extremely enjoyable actually. One of the most in-depth action RPGs I've ever played. The story is generic, but better than most others in its genre. The open world questing and Elder Scrolls style setup, combined with the Diablo and Ultima Online aspects, really grab me. Add to that all the little things to keep you immersed, such as food and sleeping in beds or hay, and the game is just one of the best PC RPGs I've ever played. I'd have loved for the game to be more polished, especially with the voice work, but it didn't detract enough for me to care. You can pick up the game for around $6 on Steam or GOG.com, and I highly recommend you do if you like action RPGs or the Elder Scrolls games, but fancy a more top-down perspective. Alright, this is the time where you click the things. Let's see, we got a sub button, we got a like button, some video buttons, and a button. Don't click the button, but do click the other ones. We both know you want to. I mean, come on, you're awesome, I'm awesome, together we could be awesomer. Do it. You'll end up hating yourself if you don't. You know I'm right.